On this show, we start with collections. Sometimes that means objects that people gather intentionally, things like tiny figures, vintage buttons, or tarot decks. But sometimes the line between a collection and a set of tools gets a little blurry. Today's episode sits right in that gray area. My guest is Bill Dellicato, a lifelong musician and keyboard player who has spent decades surrounded by synthesizers, pianos, and electronic instruments. Over the years, he's owned dozens of keyboards, vintage gear, modern rigs, and everything in between. So from the outside, it might look like a pretty classic collection. But Bill doesn't quite see it that way. For him, these instruments aren't really objects to accumulate. They're tools for chasing a sound, tools that help him create music, perform with friends, and keep exploring what's possible. And that difference leads to a really interesting question. Are we collecting things themselves or the experiences those things make possible? In this conversation, we talk about the history of synthesizers, the strange world of vintage instruments, and the constant tension musicians feel between mastering the tools they already have and chasing the next new piece of gear. It's a thoughtful, sometimes philosophical look at creativity, technology, and what it really means to collect something. This is Keeping Score. Enjoy the conversation. Yeah, so how are you? Did you have a gig last night?
Had a gig last night. Lori went down. We was at the Jersey Shore, and she went with her friend, who I know, and it was a fun night. It was like very cool bar, good vibe, and she and Judy like partied up in a big way.
And so does that make for a rough morning for Lori?
Relatively rough. There was Advil involved, but we knew we'd be kind of like uh, shut in today, so we slept in. It was more that we got home and Nina was babysitting in the neighborhood. She didn't get home until 2:45.
Dang.
It's crazy.
Dang. All right. All right. Well, good for her. Way to make
She
that money.
probably made as much money as I did last night playing.
That is, yeah, that's the life of a performer, isn't it?
That's it. And a teenage girl in a area where people are not only paying you for 8 hours of sitting, but they're tipping you out at the end. Right.
Actually that's yeah, that's awesome. All
Are
right.
you in North Carolina or you're still in New Jersey?
No, no, no. I'm in New Jersey. I drove up for the storm, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was in North Carolina and I drove up. So yeah, so it's good to be here just for the week because we didn't know what we were going to get down there.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yes.
probably not prepared like we are up here.
Well, that was exactly it. Yeah, I didn't want to staying down there if we lose power down there, it becomes just a nightmare.
Yeah.
Where up here, no problem. Full house generator and if you lose power, no worries. Just have a nice night, day in, and we were barbecuing last night out on the out on the deck.
Nice.
So yeah, so anyway, it was awesome. We're getting crushed with snow right now, just like you guys are.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, but it's awesome.
Yeah. So I've never been interviewed. So, and I have a tendency, I've been told, to talk a lot. So you have to guide me and make sure that I don't ramble on, because especially if the subject is like what I think it is, I could probably talk for like 12 hours straight.
Well, I'll be honest, we are recording right now, Bill.
That's great. All right.
So
Well,
I will
uh,
I will I will cut you off whenever is needed. But
awesome.
no, I mean that's the beauty of this, right? It's like it's not really an interview. It's just getting a chance to talk to you about things that are important to you. And that's, I mean, for me, that's actually really fantastic because you and I talk, but it's always in the context of something else, you
Yeah.
know. And that's great. I mean, it's really, it's fantastic. It's wonderful. But what I like about this is to get to talk to you about something very specific and very focused. Because even like, you're talking about your gig last night, right? So
Yeah.
the first thing that I think about and that I'm so interested in is what is that? What does it feel like? And what I mean by that is, I have a guitar and I know some cowboy chords,
Uh-huh.
and I've sat on a porch on a few occasions and played and sung to like, you know, the people who are playing with me, and then like maybe three mildly interested individuals. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that can't be more fun. That's so enjoyable. But then, I'll go and I'll see, whatever band that I love, and they're up on stage, and I just feel like that is a whole other different experience. And so, having never done that, I would love to know from, your perspective, what does it feel like being up on stage, playing music with, bandmates, and there's an audience that's responding to what you're doing?
Well, I could say it very simply. It's incredible. I mean, it's probably the fuel that makes musicians devote their life to something that, probably can't sustain a family, or, economically it can't be your career. But for me, many, many years along, it still is a buzz. And it's a high that really can't be replicated, or I can't uh, find an area where you can replicate it. You
So
know.
if there's no audience, you're in the same room, you're rehearsing, it's sound check, that feels one way. But as soon as you add an audience, something changes.
Um, yes, I think because the first thing is very internal, and it's intellectual, it's artistic, but you're not interacting with other human beings other than the people you're creating the music with. You're not getting reactions, you're not getting feedback. Hopefully, it's not feedback through the PA, but
Right.
you're not getting feedback, which you then kind of use as energy to, I guess, improve your performance. And you can't get that in a basement just playing with your fellow musicians
Hmm.
in the same way, I think.
Yeah. So is that how is that the best way to describe it? It's energy transference?
Sure, I think energy slash excitement. Um, there is an element of, although I've never really felt this, but I've talked to other people who play. There's an element of nerves or nervous energy. I don't tend to feel very nervous, but I've been doing it a long time, so maybe that's a factor. But having that uncertainty that you're on the edge, like that you're performing, that you could make a mistake, that you could forget all the parts, it's that's not present at home when I'm playing the piano, right? So, and last night was a little bit of a unique situation. Not. I guess it's gotten more and more common, where it's not even my normal band. It's a band that I sub for fairly often, and so these are not my brothers that I've been playing with for 40 years, uh, playing material that we've been playing for 40 years. It's me guesting in and coming in, and kind of there's a tremendous amount of prep that goes into that, and then being able to come into that situation and have have them say to me, it's like, it's great, and it makes you feel like you're not just a guest, you're a member of the family, which is kind of a cool feeling.
Hmm. That's awesome. Okay, who's your regular band right now? Just kind
So
of.
the regular band is Turnstiles, which um, I've been playing with for, I think it's close to 37 years.
Wow.
And that was a band that was formed in college, although I was not in it. But it was a couple of my friends who had come to see the band that I was in at the time on the Jersey Shore club circuit, and they were impressed enough with what that seemed to be that they formed a band. And they started entering the club scene, and then several years later, when the band that I was in disbanded, I went over and started playing with them.
Hmm. So we're talking like mid 90s.
Early to mid '90s.
Early
Yeah.
to mid 90s, New Jersey club scene. What's that like? Give us a
Well,
you paint us a picture. Or I mean Jersey Shore, right? We love the
yep.
Jersey Shore. We love, what paint us a picture of the New Jersey club scene in the early 90s.
Well, I you have to go back 10 years because by the early '90s, the New Jersey club scene was disintegrating, falling apart. But the prior decade, the '80s, um, was the Jersey Shore club scene was the equivalent of being in Liverpool, you know, for the Beatles. There were you were riding the high of Springsteen, Bon Jovi, um, Skid Row. There were all these bands that were coming out of New Jersey. There were venues like the Stone Pony that were viewed as very desirable places to play. And when I got into the club scene, call it mid '80s, uh, bands. It was very common for bands, and you're talking mostly cover bands, top 40 or whatever, that would play 5 nights a week. They would have, three crew members that have a box truck. They'd be carrying their gear around, and people were making their living doing that. And it would not be uncommon to have, 500 to 1,000 people in these mega clubs on the Jersey Shore, and it was kind of like going from being in high school to being a rock star on your own little level. And so as the drinking age changed, and that kind of the crackdown on driving drunk uh, started to become a reality in New Jersey, they were not able to pack those rooms on the same level. And by the early 1990s, a lot of those rooms were going out of business. They were, having a hard time maintaining uh, the momentum that they had enjoyed before. So um, by the, I'd say by the mid 90s, a lot of the people who were involved in that scene had shifted over to doing weddings and bar mitzvahs and corporate parties because that was the way you could make some money and have enough gigs to, make it worth your while.
Hmm. That's a bummer. I mean,
Yeah.
to go from what I imagine the scene was like, say in 1985,
Yep.
to playing weddings. That's but it's cool that you were there in kind of the peak, basically.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I
And,
mean, that's when you look back on those days.
and it was phenomenal. It was just I I hate to be one of these like glory days, but back in the day, but it really was an unreal situation uh, to be in, and you on a local level, you felt like you had made it, that you know you were well known, and there were these various bands that had reputations. Some bands got record deals and put out records, and the band that I was in the '80s had did two records, and uh, everyone obviously was not looking at that as an end, but a means to taking the next step. And taking the next step was where it started to fall apart.
No, was that Bystander?
Yeah, so Bystander was the band in the 80s. And, but even by the early 90s, when I shifted to Turnstiles, we were recording, we were playing 5 nights a week. We were recording our own stuff and trying to get a record deal and all that jazz. But at that point, people were starting to be in their late 20s, and it became very hard to continue that lifestyle, I think.
Hmm. Um, yeah, that's got to do some weird things to your head, right? I mean, if you have this very recent memory of being early 20s, like you said, a rock star in your, your community. But that's still, you're getting that kind of energy, that kind of response. Now you're in your late 20s, and now you're thinking about, I don't think, or maybe, you start having doubts whether or not this could be the career. What do you,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with that? Because right now, for just to set the scene a little bit, you're a lawyer. I mean,
Yeah.
you got this successful law practice. You've been doing this for a really long time, but you're still gigging. So, put us in the mind of, 20, I don't know when you went to law school, but maybe put us in the mindset of you in your late 20s.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting time where I had graduated from college, and most people were looking for jobs, in New York City or whatever it would be, entry level positions. And I did not want to do that because, in my mind, it would be surrendering and giving up on my dream of being, a rock star. Um, so I took a year or so off, just did the music, played in the band. And during that period of time, I started to, actually, I had a very interesting story that influenced my state of mind. I had a guy who lived across the street from me growing up who went to work for a company called the New England Digital at the time, which was the manufacturer of this product called the synclavier. It was used by Sting, Peter Gabriel. It was, first of all, it was like, I forget, it was $50,000 back in the late 80s or early
Wow.
90s. But anyway, so he parlayed that position into a job working at the Power Station, which was a famous recording studio in New York City. And he was working, kind of as an assistant engineer on things, and basically a gopher. And so my friend Bill and I had been, he had a song, ironically, it was called Christmas in Jail. Kind of an interesting song. But
That's awesome.
we had kind of produced it up and had a demo. And this guy Dave said, "Hey, listen, if you want to come into the Power Station overnight, we got to do it, like, you got to show up here at like 1 a.m. and we can record the song. I'll engineer it, everything." And we're like, "Wow, we've totally made it. We're going to be recording at the Power Station. That's where Springsteen records. That's where, Bon Jovi was a work there. This is basically, we're gonna make it. So we get there, and there was another friend of ours from the neighborhood who was there, who was doing the same thing. He had a song and he was recording. And I'm talking to him, and I hadn't talked to him in a while. And I said to him, like, what are you up to? And he says, "Yeah, I just graduated NYU law school, and I'm working for this big law firm, and I forget what he was making at the time. It was more money than anybody had really even imagined." And I remember driving home from the Power Station that night saying, "Boy, I've been putting my life on hold and in pursuit of this dream." And I drove to the Power Station thinking that, wow, my hard work and my dedication has paid off. Here I am recording in the power station. And here's another guy who's doing the same thing. He didn't give up anything, and he's got a great job at a law firm. So maybe I should rethink my plan. And that's why in the early 90s, I went to law school. I graduated in 95. And but when I was in the process of getting into law school, we had a friend who used to come see us in Turnstiles, and we play in New York City. And her father was a big record company executive, and there was all this talk. We're going to get it. He heard the tape, blah, blah, blah. And I had just, applied to law school, and I went through this whole thing. Maybe I should hold off. Maybe I should hold off. Maybe this is the big thing. Till I realized that was a cycle, and I said, I'm going to go ahead with my plan. If someone offers us a record deal, then I can make a decision then. But I'm not going to spend my whole life turning down every other opportunity in the hopes that one day I'm going to be internationally famous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the problem with being a creative individual. There's so few opportunities, right, to make your living doing that one thing that I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's the thing that you almost feel like you have to do.
Yep.
This thing that just for most people, I think it's really enjoyable. For others, it's almost again like an obsession. Like it's something you have
It's
to do.
like breathing.
Yeah.
This is not a decision. People don't get obsessive like this out of choice. I don't think.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. I mean, this is what's so fascinating about it. I love talking to other creative individuals who do something completely different. Um, because once you start to hear the emotional and the intellectual kind of crossover between the disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
you start to feel a connection and an understanding, and I don't know, life makes a lot more sense to me when I hear those things from other people.
Well,
Um,
it's very interesting because Turnstiles was unique in a certain way. Um, the the bass player had been in law school when we were playing 5 nights a week, so he used to study in the band room, which is insane because band room in a club scene like that is not the great place to concentrate. But he would be very focused. He came out of law school. And I remember we were driving around New York City once and we were talking about this very thing. What do we do? And my friend looked at me and he said, let's face it, you and I are not the starving artist types. And that whole creative passion came in conflict with kind of like a very pragmatic view that the musicians that I was playing with had. There was another lawyer in Turnstiles, or someone was in law school. Another guy was doing commercial real estate. So we we were all aware at that point in time that we were not prepared to be 50 and doing odd jobs or playing cocktail hours. So I think our perspective was different than many other artists could be. um, I played with a guitar player in Bystander who said to me that when he graduated high school and came out into the club scene, he was making more money than his father was
wow.
and had all this other buzz. And so when it came time to say, should you go to college? He's like, why would I go to college? This is, of course, the premise behind that is it's always going to continue, which ended up not being the case.
Hmm. All right, so okay, that's really interesting. So if you were going to give someone advice, they're 19, 20 years old, and have your own life experience to look back on, would the advice be if you 100% want to make it, don't have a backup plan.
No, I wouldn't say that.
No.
Again, I'm filled with stories. My friend Bill and I, this is before I was in bystander, we were playing, and I think we were literally 18, whatever it was. And there used to be this biker bar next door to the Stone Pony in Asbury Park called Mrs. J's. And the Stone Pony was legendary. Bruce was playing there, he was showing up all the time. This is like the Born USA period. And so the best we could get with our band at the time was to play next door at Mrs. J's. And Mrs. J's was a very rough room, and we were young, but it was fine. We were part of the scene and everything. So one night we're loading out of Mrs. J's, and next door is the Stone Pony. And at the time there was a band there. It was kind of the house band called La Bamba and the Hubcaps. So La Bamba is this guy. I think his name is Richie Rosenthal. He was a sax player, is a sax player, who had played with Southside Johnny. He knew Bruce Springsteen. He had toured with Bruce Springsteen. He was a legendary figure in this 18-year-old mind of ours, right? So anyway, we weren't old enough to get into the Stone Pony, so we had never seen him. This is before the internet. There were no photographs or anything. So one night we're loading out of Mrs. J's, and it's really late. It's like 3 a.m, and we pull onto Ocean Avenue, and we see a guy walking out of the Stone Pony with a trombone case, and we're like, "What are the odds?" I mean, like, La Bamba plays. If I said, I thought he played sax, but I think he played the trombone. But it had to be La Bamba. So the two of us are in the car together. We pull up, and we're like, "Hey, man, are you La Bamba?" He's like, "Yeah." And he looked at us, and I think he thought we might have, been looking to mug him or something like that. So he said, we're like, "Hey, listen, we have this band, and you played next door at Mrs. J's tonight, and we're really excited. And do you have any advice that because this guy was like a god on the club scene, right? Do you have any advice you could give the two of us, on how to get ahead?" And he turned to us and he looked and he goes, "Yeah, quit." And he got in his car. So he later went on. I mean, he's a very successful guy. I mean, he played in Conan's band for a long time. But, here's his attitude. Like, "Yeah, quit. It sucks." So would I tell somebody young to not have a backup plan? No, I wouldn't. Not under any circumstances. I might give them different advice than what I thought, because I thought at the time that by being in that scene and playing out and everything, that was the path. I mean, in today's day and age, I would probably tell somebody to not play out, not to gig, and develop a YouTube station and record some stuff on your laptop and focus on that. I mean, if you're trying to make it, and that you could certainly do and hold down a day job for sure.
Wow. Okay, so just help me kind of figure out it's funny because we're working backwards. When did you start playing any kind of musical instrument, and when did you start playing the piano or the keyboards, or
Yeah,
what led up to this conversation with La Bamba? How did we get there?
yeah. So I started playing the piano at 6. My mother played the piano. She had a piano. We had a piano in the house, and she used to play. And I would sit literally at the base of the piano stool and fascinated, like transfixed in a way. And then I started saying to her, I want to know how to do that. And she would show me a little bit. First pieces she showed me were The Entertainer by Scott. Actually, Entertainer, I think, was by Scott Joplin, or maybe it was Marvin Hamlish. It was right around the time of the movie The Sting. So da. Anyway, so she would show me that, and the second piece she showed me was Für Elise by Beethoven. Um, and she showed me very, very basic versions of these pieces. And that led to starting to take piano lessons, and took piano lessons for a very long time. Uh, and along that period of time, I was very into. I wanted to play the guitar, and my parents were saying, "We have a piano. You'll learn the piano. The guitar will come later." But by eighth grade, I think I had gotten a guitar, and I was teaching myself guitar. I never took guitar lessons, but yeah, that was the starting point.
Hmm. 6 years old. Do you when you're playing on stage, does those memories ever come back?
No, they don't, because those memories are more home based and family based, right? But I think about it's funny because uh, Lori came last night to the gig, and she was talking. We were talking about a couple of things, and she said that she really likes the song "Long Long Way from Home" by Foreigner, and she was like, "That was so great. You guys played that last night." And I said, when I think about that song, I always think about my band had this gig when we were seniors in high school to play at the welcome freshman dance. So like we were the seniors, and they had it in an auditorium. There were a lot of people there. We had lights and we da, da, da. And I said the first song we played was "Long Long Way from Home," Foreigner. I remember starting the night that way. So that's what I was thinking about. I mean, I don't know. I forgot what the question was, but I think about the period of time when I'm on stage. I do think maybe in terms of early times on stage, but I don't think about being 6 or 7 studying classical piano. That it wasn't even in my frame of reference until maybe the eighth grade when I started to I put together a band in the eighth grade.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, music is like this is my, and again, I'm not a musician the way you're a musician, right? So again, I have a guitar, play the cowboy chords, but I love listening to music, and the some of the artistic practices that I do revolve around sound and space. So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
have a different relationship than you do, but I can't think of anything else that exists that is anything like music. Like it's just so if music didn't exist and you described to somebody this thing and what it does to people, I don't think you would think that was possible, right? I think you would just say, well, you're describing something that is falls into the world of magic, right? I mean, it takes us places, it takes us out of time. It slows time down, it speeds times up, it makes us feel things like so deeply. Um, so for you, I mean, what is that relationship with just music, right? So I do want to get into the keyboard part of it, but
Mhm.
again, being a musician who's been playing literally your entire life, um, do you see it in the romantic way that I see it, or is it a little more, practical for you?
No, I 100% see it in the way you indicated. Um, and I do think I like to think that music is unique in that way. But if I really ponder back to the early years, I was equally I was equally passionate and obsessed with movies, with film. And I've seen I was obsessed with movies, but I don't feel like I had, or I never developed a talent to be an actor. Um, I love to read, and I've toyed with writing, um, but there's something about the connection that I felt to music and the fact that I was good at it
Mm.
at the beginning, that I think was snowballed. So I think maybe if you were talking to an actor and you said, you asked the same question, but you asked it in the context of, is acting or being a performer in that realm magic, I think he or she might say yes in
Hmm.
much the same way, you know, or an art or a visual artist, if you spoke to Manet or Picasso about this very issue, they they must have connected with the page, with the canvas, in the same way that when I look at a piano, it's a gut reaction. I don't know how else to put it.
Hmm. I mean, I do wonder about that. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder about that because it just feels to me that other art forms, I can't think of enough. I mean, maybe movies, I guess there is something about that, but so much of movies is sound. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Sure.
breaking down the individual components, there's something about, okay, maybe this is what it comes down to. When you Everything else is visual, right? And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at something, you're always outside of it. You're always on the edge. If it's a circle, you're kind of on the edge of the circle looking in at kind of the central point. So no matter what it is, whether it's whatever that thing is. But sound is the exact opposite. Like we are always enveloped in sound. And I think that like physical positioning is just, it might have something to do with it. Like it's just so different that with anything musical, you're at the center of it. Like even if you're watching it on stage, you're actually wrapped in the sound. And so I wonder if that has something to do with the
Well,
feeling of just it being so all-consuming.
well, I wonder how you would respond to this. Um, Lately, for the most part, because my vision is lousy, my lifelong passion for reading sometimes takes the form of audiobooks.
Hmm.
And there's a visual component, like you're talking about, when it comes to reading. There's the tactile touch of the page, and now I've shifted to a Kindle because I can enlarge the text. A little sad, but I wonder if we perceive the expression differently listening to an audiobook as opposed to actually writing it, reading the writing, because I do think that there are multiple senses that go into watching a movie, right? So it's not just the audio or the sound. There's the visual. There's jump scares. There's whatever. There's light, and it creates a different environment, uh, because music, you can't put it in a corner and say it is 100% just listening, right? So you could sit in a dark room with earphones on, and that will be one experience. But you go to my show last night, and the fact that the bar was crowded and people had drinks and there were lights and there were various, you actually saw the musicians who they were. Remember in the early days, Pink, no one knew what Pink Floyd looked like. It was a big mystery. And I think that added to the perception of how you process the music. And so I don't know that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether it's just that it's only uh, auditory, if that's the right, or whether it's only that you're processing with your ears. I think that music um, can have many different ways about it. We've evolved from just listening to music to how it's presented to us. There's a phenomenal book out there by David Byrne of the Talking Heads, where he talks a lot about why we love music and how we react to it. I mean, he said it in many ways better than I could ever. But you know, over time, how we enjoy music has changed, and it's changed um, how our enjoyment is, or the depth of involvement. There was a time where the only way people experience music is the way that you say that you play, which is with a few people around with your guitar, right? There were no records, there were no like, high production, there were no PA systems and groups. People gathered in living rooms and someone played the piano, and that was music. So it has evolved into a multi-layered experience. I mean, in a few weeks, we're going to Las Vegas to see the Eagles, who I love. I think I mentioned this to you, who I love them, but we're going to see them in the Sphere. So it's not going to be just hearing Lying Eyes and, take it to the limit. There's going to be other elements that come in that will hopefully enhance the experience as opposed to detract from it.
Yeah. First of all, I'm so jealous. I'm so really when I'm so jealous that you guys are going to go see that. They're amazing.
Yeah.
That experience is going to be amazing. Yeah, I mean that's right. I mean everything you're saying, certainly it's true. It is multi-layered, and it is evolving. But for me, I do love all of that. I think of going to see like an Iron Maiden show and
Mm-hmm.
what and just the theatrics. And it does it's interesting. I mean, it does enhance it in a certain direction. But there's something about whether it's headphones, I actually typically don't listen to headphones. I like listening through speakers.
Yep.
But sitting in a dark room, the lights
Yep.
off, sitting in a dark room with a record on and just closing my eyes. I mean, just getting lost in the music in that way. It's not that it's better or worse, but it's different. And I guess that's usually when I feel that sensation that this is different, you know. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean yeah, it's so great. I mean, I love hearing your your kind of point of view. Uh,
Well, to go back to the pragmatic aspect of the present day, my friends and I often question the sanity of doing what we're doing, as I approach 60. And one of the justifications we put out there is a lot of our peers, they play golf. They're passionate about golf.
hmm.
They buy new golf clubs, they go to golf clinics, they get up early and they go to the golf club and they play with other people that like to play golf. And in a way, my musical activity in the public serves that purpose. I'm playing golf with my lifelong buddies or people that are very good at golf, and we're, instead of paying green fees, we're getting paid a meager sum. But it's my outlet, and I wish it weren't my outlet. I wish it was my everything. But pragmatism comes back in, and it's not in the cards.
Uh, we hate pragmatism. Yeah. All right. So, all right, yeah. I mean, I could go on and on. Really, just kind of getting into the psychology of what you just said. Um, in, instead of going down that rabbit hole just yet, um, I do want to just I want to talk about your keyboards a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because and I'm so happy we had this chance to talk the way we've been talking for the last whatever, half hour or so, because that sort of atmosphere helps me understand why you you know have these objects, these keyboards,
Mhm.
um and what they might mean to you beyond just, I press a key and a sound comes out, right?
Right.
It's not just a tool, right? So that's really helpful. So I don't know, do you think of yourself as a collector, in terms of the number of keyboards that you have? Um or maybe the question is like, when you think of the word collector, what do you think of, and do you fall into that category?
Yeah, great question. Um, because all of the obsessiveness that we talked about with music translates into the tools that you use to create music, right? Um, and these tools, I'll call them instruments, are a means of expression, but they're more than that. They're often uh, a statement. As you know, there's something in me that wants to say, I play a Steinway piano, and the Steinway piano is the best. Now that opens a can of worms in the Steinway community, because you say, well, what year was your Steinway? And you really have to go back to the Hamburg Steinways, because the New York Steinways, blah blah blah. You can go down a rabbit hole with this whole discussion. But whenever you approach tools, you are making a statement. When I go out and I play with my current rig, um, I'm making a statement, which is insane, because really no one is really monitoring what I'm bringing out, other than maybe a random keyboard player that would come in and is a geek like me, right? So um, I've deluded myself at various points in time buying things, because I feel like to show up with them on stage, I'll be legitimate. I'll be, whoa, wow, he's got this or he's got that. Must be, that's not a casual player. Um, but as far as collecting, I mean, I guess the connotation with collecting with me has always been tied to quantity, uh, in a way. And in that sense, I don't think that I am a collector. I have had a degree of pragmatism in the instruments that I've gotten or collected, for lack of a better term. Um, and I've always felt the danger of accumulating too many tools was that you diluted your ability to maximize the utility that each one, kind of represented. And I always resisted that, because I feel like people who go down that route, um, they it's a little bit of the shiny new thing element, especially with the evolution of synthesizers and electronic keyboards. Um, it's like selling iPhones. They gotta get people to keep coming back with the upgrades, and they're all debated and everything. But the truth is that the very first version has so much capability that nobody really devotes their time and effort to. They just go out and they buy another thing. The perfect example I give is, I'm sure you recognize the name, a man named Brian Eno, who was a keyboard player in a band called Roxy Music, but he's
Hmm.
also later years producer. And he was a strong proponent of a synthesizer called the Yamaha DX7. And Yamaha DX7 is a whole discussion in and of itself. There's been people who've written doctoral theses on it and its effect on the culture. But it's been much criticized, and it's also been viewed as overly complex and very difficult in the way that it generates sounds. But Brian Eno mastered it, and he devoted all his time, instead of like going into a studio and seeking a sound and saying, oh, well, bring that synthesizer in because that's the one that it's associated with that sound. He would sit at the Yamaha DX7 and squeeze it out, right? And I have been guilty over the years of saying, I want to collect this particular instrument because only with this particular type of instrument can I achieve this type of sonic result. When a Brian Eno would say that's ridiculous. Like, start with the tools and bring your A game to it, and you're going to achieve, you can achieve similar things. Now, that's hotly debated. But if you have the Eno philosophy, the desire to collect is diminished because you make one good purchase and you squeeze every bit of utility out of it. And if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. There's a bunch you said in there that that I'd like to hear a little more about. Um, okay, so but before I actually ask you the follow-up, because I think I don't know this answer, and I suspect a lot of other people don't either. But just very basically, is there a difference between a synthesizer and a keyboard, or for if there is a difference, what is it? And for the context of this conversation, could we use either word?
Uh, Not all keyboards are synthesizers, and not all synthesizers are have keyboards attached.
Okay.
So a piano is a keyboard. It's not really a synthesizer. And you could have a guitar synthesizer. You could have a virtual synthesizer, which is all the rage right now, that you trigger from a drum, from a drum pad.
Hmm.
So I don't know that I think there is a distinction.
Okay, so just for a person who's sort of new to this world, what do I call the things that you play?
Well, you would call them keyboards because that is the vast majority of synthesizers are triggered by keyboards, right?
Okay.
But you have keyboard instruments like a Hammond organ, right, which is not really a synthesizer in the sense that we're talking about. It's an organ, right, or a Steinway piano is not. You never call it a synthesizer. Um, Synthesizers came into existence, and this is actually very interesting. Synthesizers came into existence probably in the 1960s, maybe the late 50s. And one of the original proponents of it was a man named Dr. Robert Moog. And he put together a modular synthesizer. He was an engineer, right? Like, so he wasn't necessarily even a musician. But what the theory behind a synthesizer was molding sound based upon uh, various methods, right? Now, in the beginning of synthesizers were not designed to try to emulate existing instruments because that becomes relevant later on. But the allure of synthesizers was you can make sounds that you've never heard before. You've heard a piano, you've heard a guitar, you've heard an organ. Now we're going to make something that sounds like we've never heard before.
Hmm.
In the early ages of my involvement in this, the notion was you could take the attack of a piano and mold it with the sustain and release of a flute, and then transform that into a violin. Like, people were saying that the options were unlimited, the possibilities were unlimited. So that's how synthesizers started. Before synthesizers were around, keyboards really talked about the acoustic piano, electric piano. There were two main brands, the Wurlitzer electric piano and the Rhodes electric piano. And then there was the Hammond organ. And that was what keyboard players played. And then synthesizers started coming in. And in the beginning, they were very niche. They were like very electronic sounding. You know, you think about one of the early uses commercially of synthesizers was the Emerson, Lake and Palmer song Lucky Man, where at the end, Keith Emerson plays this solo on a Moog modular. And he's using things like portamento, which is a slide between keys that no one had ever heard before. Like you couldn't play that. You could play it on the piano. It would sound terrible, right? So it came on the scene and it was like, wow, this is, and in the beginning, synthesizers were monophonic. They only had one, you could play one note at a time. And as they evolved, you know, the technology evolved, then you could play polyphonic synthesizers. So you could play chords, right? And now it wasn't like only a lead instrument. You could play pads beyond, you know, in the same way you could play a piano, so on and so forth. And in the beginning of that evolution, all these synthesizers were analog. They dealt with actual electricity, right? And oscillators, generating sound waves, manipulating them in a filter, and then amplifying them through an amplifier. And so the analog synths were very erratic. They were fat sounding. They were, you know, they were rich sounding in a way that people were not accustomed to. And then you got to the early 1980s, and Yamaha came out with this Yamaha DX7, which I have a Yamaha DX7 sitting right next to me. And DX7 used completely different technology to generate sounds. So they used frequency modulation of sine waves, as opposed to the analog synthesizers would start with a square wave or a sawtooth wave, and they would filter it out, like they would take elements away. The DX7 started from the basic wave of a sine wave, and by combining those waves at different frequencies and different algorithms, you could generate even more complex sounds than what those analog synths were doing. So when the DX7 came out, people were throwing away their analog synths. This goes back to the collecting thing. People were throwing away these analog synths. You couldn't get $50 for them, right? And then, lo and behold, 30 years later, those analog synths are selling for like $50,000 from a collector's standpoint. So think about that, because people want those vintage instruments. And it's ironic because as synthesizers started to evolve, they went away from their original mission statement where they were trying to create sounds that you'd never heard before. A lot of the synthesizers were trying to emulate pianos, organs, electric pianos, the early synthesizer sounds. So the question became, can a DX7 sound like a piano? Do you make a DX7 sound like a piano? You could do it more than the older synths. And they said the same thing about, can you get a DX7 to sound like a Moog modular? Because it's using different technology to get there. And it's digital, it's not analog, right? You know, this is like the same thing with CDs and turntables. But we've gotten to an insane place with keyboards where I have on my iPhone a free app that emulates a mini Moog synthesizer. Okay. If you go on eBay right now and type in original, 1970 mini Moog, you're probably selling for like $7,000. And I can replicate that on my iPhone and my other keyboards. Now, the people who are in that marketplace have, I'm going to be careful, I was about to say deluded themselves, but they are convinced that the original thing is justified in collecting that original thing, even though those things break down. It's hard to find parts and everything, because you can never replicate the true original instrument. And I tell you that the vast majority of the population, 99.9%, would never be able to distinguish between an original Mini Moog and my iPhone app. I'm telling you the truth. But
Yeah.
this group feel differently, and they're passionate about it.
So you're not in that group.
I'm not in that group. Um, but it has, but participating in those chat rooms and everything has fueled my collecting of various instruments. So for the longest time, I did not have a truly analog, what they call knobby synth, where this is the original days of synthesizers. They had knobs and they were analog, and their tone drifted and everything. Anyway, so recently, after years of feeling deficient in my life, right, I bought an analog synth. It's a new analog synth, but I feel like I'm able to put to rest that kind of deficiency in my rig, because I have the DX7. DX7 is the FM synth, and an analog synth can't really make analog FM synth sounds, and vice versa. There are different tools for different approaches. But the great irony of that long on ramp to me getting an analog synth is I have it here and I play it, and my primary keyboard when I play out is called the Nord Stage 3, and they have a virtual analog synth in there. And if I have to be completely honest, I really can't. I can detect a little bit of a difference. I'm not saying this opinion is invalid, but when you mix it into a song and put it through processors and reverbs, or God forbid, play at the bar I played at last night, there's no way in hell you're telling the difference. So if you're a collector, it's like cars, right? You could have a brand new Lexus that is a feat of engineering that is unbelievable. Or you could have a GT, you could have a Chevy Impala that from 67, or whatever year it is. And you're never going to convince the collector of old cars that Lexus is better.
Yeah.
Because I think at its heart, collection is grounded in many ways in nostalgia and in the rear window. And in a way, it's a polar opposite from early adopters with advancements in technology. The people who are playing, you're a guitar player, people who are playing a 57 Strat will never walk into the Guitar Center and see the brand new Strat that's made in, actually, they have American Strats, and they're more desirable than the Mexican one. They'll never even pick up that guitar. There's hubris in this, because they're convinced that there was a period of time where these things were created, and as a result, there hasn't been an evolution, or the evolution has been negative. It's crazy. The Yamaha DX7, when I first got my first Yamaha DX7, it had all these complaints about it. There's, I think, there's digital noise created because the processing was bad, and I think they call it aliasing. It creates like an unpleasant digital noise, right? It's lo-fi, right? But then the Yamaha DX7 came out with the DX7 II, which is actually the model I have here, where they improved the processors. There is online debate. People spending their entire nights debating the first generation DX7 has got more grit and integrity. Even though the DX7 II corrected all the problems, now the people are saying, I like the problems. It's like, and I don't know. You really wonder if these people that are holding on to collector's items are really ignoring the power of the evolution of the technology that is creating these new instruments. Like, let me tell you something. You take this Nord Stage 3 and you plop it into 1970, it would be like from another planet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
all right.
So
Let me give you the
I
opposite side.
told you I could talk all day.
No, I love this. No, it's fantastic. I mean, I'll give you, I think, the maybe the opposite side of that equation. Um, because you're right. If you're purely basing your evaluation on performance, new cars perform better, digital watches perform better.
Mm-hmm.
Spotify performs better, than a pile of records. There's so many things that fall into that category. And it's true. I mean, I suspect there is a set of individuals who are just anti-new, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, but even those people, I have a feeling that there is something very deep inside of us that responds to the mistakes and the errors and the difficulty in using something, because I think that reminds us that we're humans. Like that's the human element of it, right? So when we get something that, and I mean, I say this, I collect, I mean, collect. I have a small collection of watches.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a fairly large collection of records. Uh, I have a lot of books, not quite sure that we would call it a collection, but it's certainly a library. I mean, all of those things have, you know, modern day equivalents that perform much, much better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need a watch when you have your phone? Why do I need records when I have Spotify, that sort of thing? But when I put on a record and there is just the slightest, I don't want to hear a scratchy record that skips, but, just the needle kind of touching the record and it makes that initial, sound. There's something in that I think truly, I mean, it's not right in the forefront of my thoughts, like, oh, that this reminds me that I'm a human being. Um, but I do think it's there. I think it's really kind of underneath the surface as this really strong kind of river of this connects me to the world that I live in. And it's the same thing with a mechanical watch. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you think that this is what's going on in the keyboard community, that people who are saying like, no, no, you should have, if you can afford it, you should have, these early analog instruments because they connect you to something that the newer ones don't.
Well, but I think to go back to your turntable example, I still think that your description that it connects you to being human and everything is grounded in nostalgia more than it is in any kind of objective thing. Because if you had never experienced music that way, um, and you had grown up on CDs, okay, would you, 20 years, 30 years into the experiment, have the same response when you put that record on? If you had never had a mechanical watch and you had always had an iWatch, if someone presented that mechanical watch to you and didn't give you any background or context to say that this was, explain to you what it was, just said, here, wear this watch for a couple of days, compare it to your iPhone, iWatch, and what do you think? if you remove the nostalgia and the connection to the past, and you just objectively evaluate the two things based upon present day, and you A B, like, a lot of the stuff that's going on with the keyboards, and I'm obsessed with this on YouTube, is people are A Bing things. Like, so the Nord has an incredible organ sound. So they play one note on a Nord organ sound and they play it on actual organ. And they're saying, oh, well, the actual organ is warmer. And, you wonder to what extent this is confirmation bias. Like, so the best way to do that is to kind of take the visual back out and say, take the Pepsi challenge. Like, which one do you like? Because I think that when we make these decisions about older items, I mean, how does anyone collect anything without it having an element of connectivity to your past, to your impressions? Right now, like, just to get off topic, but I'm reading Proust in Search of Lost Time. And if you've never read it, like, the basic premise is it's about involuntary memory. And the famous beginning part of the book is that this man is somewhere and he takes a Madeline, it's a cookie, and he dips
Yeah.
it into a cup of tea, and it brings him back to his childhood where his nanny basically would do that. And it triggers this whole memory of his upbringing. And his point is that we go through life and we have involuntary memories triggered by various things all the time. And I think that when we're collecting these things of the past, it's bringing us back. And maybe that is making us human. I don't know, because it reflects our experiences. If we have no context to evaluate something, maybe we get a different result.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's no way to separate your experience of anything from your prior experiences, right? So that's
Yep.
that's 100%. Um, but yeah, I do. I mean, first of all, I think when you're collecting anything, the idea of uh, rational goes out the window.
Yeah.
Um, I think A being things is probably a mistake. As that sort of a general philosophy or, approach to, I don't know, the thing that you're doing. Um, so, I mean, acknowledging all of that, I do think, at least I think of my collections. I mean, I do think they're better. I mean, I hate to use that term. Um, But when I put on it, and kind of directly to your question, like, if I didn't know, if I didn't grow up with records, or I didn't grow up with, watches. First of all, I didn't grow up with watches that were mechanical, right? So that's something.
Right.
Um, there's something very soulless about scrolling through music on my iPhone or my phone, on Spotify. It's just something about it. Just I don't
About
know.
the experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's missing. I mean, we are physical beings in space. And so I think the tactile nature of things really does play a really big part. And I think the more digital you go with things, you just lose that element. And I would say if you look at who's collecting records now and the resurgence of records, you do get a lot of people who probably have this nostalgia, kind of drive. But you also get a lot of people who that is not at all. It couldn't be, these, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids who that it's not possible, right? That would be the primary driver of why they're collecting records. Um, yeah, no, I
Do
think
you think that those kids just are better at discerning some sort of innate, inherent quality? Or what do you think, if it's not a draw to the past, what's driving them to lean towards something that is much more difficult to maintain, you know,
Yeah, totally.
yeah, that's more costly. Um, what's driving that?
I think we respond to the physicality of things in a way that is underappreciated. And I would say that for anything, cars, um, people get used to driving electric cars, but but certainly there are people who don't like the fact that you can't hear the engine kind of
Mhm.
revving up. It seems like often when something like that happens, the new thing does its best to replicate the old thing.
Yes.
Okay, instead of just typing into my keyboard, like my computer keyboard and making these sounds on my computer, let me make an actual keyboard that replicates what a piano looks like, and then let me take it a step farther and, let me try and replicate the response of the keys on a piano when it's actually sort of activating a hammer that's hitting a string or a wire that's making, you know what I mean? Like there's just something really missing when you go too far down the digital road.
Well, that's
Um,
absolutely. If you remember, I mentioned that I always felt deficient because I didn't have. I described it as a knobby analog synth.
yeah,
There's something tactile about turning knobs, right? And you can, as I said, I have an iPhone app or I have a digital synth that will emulate that, but it's not the same. You're going into menus. You feel like a computer programmer. There's something about twisting a knob and
yeah,
that. And so I think that that's a big element. The other irony is this new analog synth I have has a knob on it that says vintage. What vintage does is it makes the oscillators drift the way that they did in the beginning
mm,
because that's a more human,
yeah,
less digital. But yeah, so but I do think, and probably be after I'm gone, like engineers who are operating in this environment are aware of this. The whole ball game is in modeling the imperfections in these, like they may be able
yeah,
to get to a point with digital technology where they can replicate identically the experience that you're talking about with the turntable,
yeah,
so the other thing I was thinking about, because one area of collecting that I find doesn't apply to a lot of the things we're talking about is coins. So there are people who collect coins, and I don't think that they're collecting those coins because they think the coins were cut better, you know, years ago. So my nostalgia thing or tied, you know, I don't know what drives a coin collector.
mm, yeah. I mean, well, again, I don't, I think any collection is one of the fun things about any collection is it does tie you to the past
Yeah.
without question, right? So I'm certainly I'm not suggesting that's not a really important element to this idea of collection. But it's interesting because I've had a similar conversation with other people who the thing that I might argue is a collection because it has utility in their mind, it doesn't quite feel like a collection. Um, which is interesting. That the idea that because you're using these things, not maybe not all of them, but you're using these things on a daily, weekly basis. Maybe they don't quite feel like a collection to you, but on the other hand, in certain ways when you talk about them, it certainly seems like collector uh activity, collector mentality.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um
for sure.
So, all right, so take me back to there's something you said earlier that I thought was really interesting. Like what, way back and when we kind of started to talk about keyboards, that part of the conversation, you talked about an instrument making a statement, right? You
Yeah.
kind of show up, you have this thing, or maybe you don't show up. It's actually just in your studio, but it makes you
Yeah.
feel a certain way, right? And so that sort of this made me think about this idea of this transference of energy between the tool itself and to you, and then back again, and then to other people. And are you do you still have that? Like, is that something that still was that an earlier sort of
No,
feeling, or are you still on board with if I get this thing, I now have this feeling?
I still think it's as strong maybe as ever.
Okay.
But I'm also mindful that it's not that it's juvenile, but I feel bad about it,
Really?
even though I'm recognizing it.
Why do you feel bad about it?
Well, we were talking about watches. Um, would wearing a Rolex, a classic Rolex, make you feel like you were broadcasting something different than a Timex from the same year? Assuming.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, I think I see where you're going with this. Yes, I would certainly feel different. In some ways, I would feel better about the Timex,
Mhm.
and in other ways, I would feel better about the Rolex. But that's the nice thing about collecting is that I like the feeling. You know what I mean? Like, each one has its place. It goes back to this A being. I don't, as a collector, I don't have to make a judgment. The Timex is worse or better than the Rolex. I can just love each one for what it brings to the table. And so,
Well,
yeah, if
you
you're
got to dig into that a little bit more. You got to say what you love each one for what how it makes you feel, right?
right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And
Absolutely.
so I think the reason why I feel bad about what we're talking about is it's rooted in another deep insecurity in my life, um, which is notion of feeling legitimate,
Hmm.
like you're a real player if you play keyboard X. If you're and it used to be a joke like, oh, you're a keyboard player. What's your main uh, arsenal? What's in your arsenal? Yeah, I have a Casio. And people would look at actually Casio has improved, and I owned a Casio for a long time, and people would be like, oh, Casio, like they have an attitude.
Yeah, totally.
Doesn't matter how it sounds. Doesn't matter that I'm a good player. So I think that there's a little bit of elitism in how we feel, and you can source that to the Rolex, right? Like, yeah, I got a roll. I have a vintage Rolex. Um, it's going to say something, and it's a deeply personal thing. That's why, I'll switch over to my other life. A lot of work I do in my practice is estate planning, and you have people who are collectors who want to dispose or arrange for the disposal of their collection after they're gone. And when you talk with these people, you get into very interesting psychological things because collections are inherently tied to the person who's collecting them. They're not
Yeah.
universal. So my father-in-law, who collects like a lot of really wacky stuff. And we joke with him. He's saying, like, when he's gone, like, what are we going to do with this stuff? Because it means something to him, right? Certain old guns. I guess you got to find somebody who's like-minded, but it's not universal. Like,
No, no.
so it's hard to detach the way that collected items make you feel from you know what a collection is like. Not one person's treasured collection is another person's garbage pile, right? So it's like it depends on who the person is, who the collector is.
Yeah. Well, but that's the beauty of it. So I'll tell two things as you were saying that. Uh, there's you see a meme out there. which always makes me laugh. It'll be like I've seen this at record shows, and it's a picture of like a woman, and she's kind of has her head down, and she's clearly very sad. And then there's a guy kind of next to her, and he has his arm on her shoulder, and the little word bubble says, "I'm so sorry to hear about your uncle. Dot dot dot. Did he collect records?" You know, and I see that, and that just it's that impulse is so real
Yeah.
because as you were saying, in my professional life, I come across a lot of people with collections. My initial reaction was, you should call me because I don't care what the collection is. I would love to know what it is because you're right. The chances of the kids or the whatever, the
Yep.
nieces and nephews wanting that particular collection are probably pretty slim, right?
Yep.
But the idea that somebody has this collection and maybe it goes to auction or it does whatever, and however somehow it gets put back out into the world, back out in the stream, as someone recently kind of put it to me. That's beautiful. It's really wonderful because it is so personal, right? So I think if you have an expectation of your collection being passed down from generation to generation, while that might be really nice, and if it happens, fantastic. Um, because collections are so personal, you might be disappointed. I don't know who wants, whatever. Pick your collection.
Well,
But
but the only exception to that is it goes back to the whole nostalgia argument. And a collection of junk, if it's your father's junk,
yeah,
is worth keeping as,
yeah,
as
totally.
a collect. It's not a collection that you would have put together,
Yeah,
but if every time you look at that set of coins, you think of your father, it has utility, right?
yeah, yeah, totally. Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like when you tell me about, a memory of you're 6 years old, you're sitting, kind of next to or maybe even underneath, your mom playing the piano,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's like it's hard. What if that's not, while it may not be at the forefront of your thinking, right? Again, I think it's another one of those things that must be kind of underneath all of these things, all of these feelings that you have for these instruments, whether you're just looking at it, whether you're playing it. Um, so maybe give me a sense of how many keyboards you have. Like let me get a sense of, how many do you have? How many do you play? How many have you had over your lifetime? Why do you get rid of them? When do you buy them? Just
Yes.
clear that
So
picture up for me.
I have. So I'm in my studio right now. I have four keyboards set up, and I have one module, which is called a synthesizer brain that can trigger from any of these keyboards.
Mm,
Upstairs in our bedroom, I have a digital piano that we used to have in the apartment. And we have this Steinway baby grand up in the house. So to give perspective, I have a note which I'm looking through my phone for, and the name of the note is keyboards owned. And it goes. I went back at one point and tried to chronicle all the keyboards that I've owned over the course of my life. Um, and let me see if I use the search feature. Let's see, this is why technology is good. Key uh, oh, and yeah, here we go. So it's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. About 25
wow.
from when I began this journey. Um, and so what causes me to cycle out and you know, upgrade or sell? Um, the I think that there's two elements. There's one which is true raw sound. It's got to sound great, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
earlier stuff, as technology was at its starting points, we had samplers that were like, they were really gritty, to put it very generously. And then the samples got to be so good that it's really a challenge for the manufacturers to distinguish the better samples, right? Because they're all, you know, you reach a point, a threshold where the ear can't discern these differences, right? So that first one is just sheer sound quality. The second one is what I'll describe as user interface. Like, how do you interact with the instrument? Like, how is it laid out? Does it have knobs? Does it have menus? Can you do whatever you want with it? Like, can you put a piano at the bottom octave and put a trumpet at the top and an organ in between? And how quickly can you change sounds? So user interface, and that um, is a bigger factor than you might think, because ease of use and um, ability to do what you want to do quickly and easily is a huge factor, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's driven. I'd say that those two things have driven my acquisitions and sales over the years.
So, it's funny when you're talking about what's interesting about this conversation to me is there is a very emotional component to the creation of music. But when you talk about the actual tools for you, which is the keyboards, piano, there seems to be a very much less emotional, right? Almost like
Yes.
a detachment. Um, so when you look at a keyboard, is there any sense of beauty in the object itself? Does just looking at it kind of
Yes.
create, you know what I mean? Like,
100%. Yeah.
okay, so tell me about that because it seems like you've had instruments, you've gotten rid of them, you're down to, if I counted correctly, five or six.
Yeah.
Um, you've talked about kind of the way they work, the sounds that they produce. But I don't know that I haven't heard anything that would indicate there's again just an element of beauty of the object itself. So yeah, tell,
So
tell me about that.
so when I was, call it in high school or whatever, I used to subscribe to Keyboard Magazine. So you'd have all these um, great articles about gear, music. Musicians would be, keyboard players would be interviewed. And around that time, there was a synthesizer that came out that was one of the first polyphonic, programmable with memory. You could save the sounds, right? Synthesizers, and it was a synthesizer called the Prophet Five. And the Prophet Five was made by an American guy, engineer, and it was very expensive, but it was also kind of groundbreaking. I have a folder from my child. I have a lot of paraphernalia or nostalgic items from my childhood. I found the folder years ago, and I have a cutout from that magazine of the Prophet Five, because you just look at it and it's beautiful looking. It had like wood on the end, it had black, like the fonts that they chose to use,
Hmm.
the thing. It just, I remember as a child looking at that going, oh my God, look at that. That it looks phenomenal, right? So I've been struggling over the last 15 years because Prophet Fives have been reissued. Okay. Um, and I've been like wanting one, but my pragmatic side saying, you don't need a Prophet. What the hell? Like, it, but what has always been driving that is what you're describing is just like a sheer emotional reaction to the way it looks and the way it sounds. Now, it hasn't forced me to, if I were a different person and I was uh, more footloose and free with my collecting, I would just buy a Prophet 5 just so I could say I own it, right? Or a Mini Moog. But you look at a Mini Moog, and yes, it's a thing of beauty to a geek, a keyboard geek. You look at a Steinway piano and the craftsmanship, and it is just, it's a feat of engineering. I mean, there's actually a movie about the building of Steinway pianos. It's fascinating, right? So, distinct from the music is a level of appreciation of the engineering of these things. Just like in the same way, the first time you picked up an iPhone or an iPad, you're like, wow. And I think Steve Jobs meant it to be that way. He said that, when someone buys an Apple product, I read his biography, Walter Isaacson, I think it was. He said when someone opens an Apple product, that experience of the box and all that is all part of it. It's all part of it. It's not the same as opening a black box from UPS with a Dell computer in it. It's different. And yes, 100%, like my reaction, I go into the Guitar Center and I'm walking around like a kid in a candy store looking at, and on the flip side, there's some I look at it, oh, they're ugly. I don't want that. I would never want to own that. So it's bizarre.
Yeah, I'm okay. So I'm on eBay right now,
Uh-huh.
and I'm looking at a mini Moog. Moog or Moog?
It's Moog, but
Moog, mini
very
Moog.
often mispronounced, but it's actually Moog.
Well, that's the rookie keyboardist in me. Mini Moog, is that what we just said?
Yeah.
Yeah, mini Moog. Yeah, that's fantastic. Does it fold?
Uh, no, but it can lie flat, but typically the back portion with the knobs rises up.
Okay, but that's what I mean. It folds in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so it hinges. Yeah, so it is beautiful. At least the one I'm looking at is trimmed out in wood. It looks almost like a, NASA panel from the 60s.
Yeah.
I actually, I love the font. I love the placement of, at least in the version I'm looking at, there are red switches that are
Yeah.
sort of
Red and
split.
orange sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the reddish orange. There's green ones as well, but the reddish orange ones are primarily crossing white lines.
Yep.
The green ones are not. Anyway, I mean, it's really, really beautiful. And then looking at the
The Prophet
Prophet
5.
5,
Yeah.
it's beautiful in a different way. First of all, it is interesting to see the evolution of the dials and the font and the switches. Yeah, I don't know why you don't have both of these right now. Like, it's really, really fascinating to me. I mean, if you had to figure out, I'm asking you very directly, why don't you have both of these? Like,
Well, it's funny because I have digital approximations of them that, from a sound perspective, satisfies that aspect.
wow, really?
Oh yeah.
That's it. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but from an emotional point of view, um, for instance, I love baseball and I collect baseball bats.
Uh-huh.
I know that a aluminum bat will hit a ball farther. It won't sting my hands the way a wooden bat will. It'll last a long, long time. It's not going to crack. I don't want an aluminum bat. Like I want a wooden bat.
Yeah.
Because the sound that it makes is, fantastic. It's better. I like the sting in my hands. You know what I mean? Like, so it's so interesting. that you're saying because you have a way to replicate the sounds,
Yeah,
you don't need you don't need the object.
that's right. Because I think that they're two distinct things we're talking about.
Wow.
There is the utility of the tool,
Yeah.
and there is that emotional kind of irrational reaction to just a device or a thing or whatever it is. And there's, I guess, there's a third element with me.
Let me just interrupt a little bit. Sorry. Because I think there's a couple times where you've sort of, you said like, well, I kind of feel bad that I want something or that I
Yeah.
have it or I feel a certain way. And then you just described it as irrational.
Mm-hmm.
What, I mean, is it? You know what I mean? Like, like I kind of feel like, I don't think you should feel bad. And I don't think it's irrational. I mean, maybe talk a little bit deeper about your thoughts. Like, is there some maybe kind of deeper philosophical approach to life
Yeah.
that maybe I'm missing that in the way in which you view these things?
I think there absolutely is.
Okay.
So I know because when Lori was telling me that you want to talk to me, she said that she shared with you this notion that I have this deep rooted thing where if I'm not going to use something a lot, I feel bad or I don't feel that the purchase is justified. So to
Mm,
have a profit five for that initial buzz, right? Of touching it, feeling it, I have it, okay, and playing it and having that experience. And then to put a cover over it and really because it's not my primary gigging keyboard. I don't necessarily use Prophet 5 type sounds in recordings I do in my studio, but just having it, I feel is an injustice to the instrument because I've already gotten that sensation
mm,
from acquiring it. So if it's an acquisition buzz that I'm seeking and it's expensive, I have a harder time. I find that to be that's what I'm describing as irrational.
hmm
And the I I go back to the Brian Eno. Like there's a part of me that has written mission statements to say, uh, have less gear and use what you have better, more productively.
hmm
You know, don't be chasing because I feel like first of all, time is limited, right? I feel like I could spend a lot of time just chasing the collection, the kill, the acquisition. And that becomes in and of itself a thing. And I don't want to spend my time and my resources on that as a thing. And maybe part of me does, but not enough. I think that when I start to go down that path, I say, let me go down into the basement with what I have and engage with it. Like engagement with what I have, mastering, what I have, having that be. Well, I have. There's a great scene in the one of the later Star Wars movies where all looks like it's lost, and the rebellion, and they go up to Princess Leia and they say, well, "What are we going to do?" She's like, "We have everything that we need to fight this battle. Now we're going to fight it." Don't look for uh, something else to tap that. We have I have all the tools I need to make great music. I should spend more time making great music and playing than I should buying a Prophet 5, turning it on, getting that sugar rush, and then having it break down, and then having to bring it in for repairs. And like, I just think there's better paths for me.
Yeah. Interesting. So are you an anti-collector?
Well, we started out by saying you have to define, like I maybe am prejudiced and I say I define collecting by quantity. Like, you know, is somebody who has acquired three things a collector? Or do you need more? Or are you always actively collecting? So, because if that's the case, then I am probably an anti-collector.
Mm.
Um, but because it's collecting for collecting's sake, like my collecting that I've done, right? And I mean, I have had 25 of these things over the course of my, that's not to count the software synths that I have, right? Um, I have, um, it's always been informed by my desire to play music and 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 perform. And when I play out with, I mean, I'm going to complicate this, but I play out with one keyboard, and it's designed to emulate damn good emulation. Call it 90% of the way. What I'm trying to achieve, and in a light package. Now I use the second keyboard because I want weighted keys for the piano sounds, but that's a separate discussion. Um, and when I come home after a night like last night, I'm still, and Lori is tired of me saying it, I love my Rick. It sounds great. It's what I dreamed about. Like I always had deficiencies along this road where it was like, oh, the organ sound is just lame. Oh, I wish it could sound more like a real organ. Blah, blah, blah. And now I feel like if I were to get a Prophet 5, and let's just forget about the pleasure of the ownership, like we were talking about, just talk sheer sound quality. I think that Prophet 5 would sound better than the app. It's not that it wouldn't, but the marginal amount that it is just doesn't justify spending, thousands of dollars.
Oh my God, it's so funny. In this regard, we are so different. I mean, this is the beauty of life because, people are so different. I would argue that the marginal difference is where like the magic of life happens. It's like the difference between going to, Applebee's for a hamburger, right? And then going to, pick your pick your burger palace, in New York that kind of has this, really special way of kind of putting one of these things together. Like on the surface, they're both burgers. And if you were to blind taste test them, you would think, well, they're pretty close. Yeah, this one's marginally better. But it's like for me, that feels like that's again where the beauty of life resides in those margins.
I'm not discounting that, but what I would probably say is that if you're talking about somebody who is adamant that the ultimate steak experience is Peter Luger's in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
talking to somebody who's convinced that the ultimate steak experience is Smith Walensky's in Manhattan. Um, both of those things are good. And there are nuances that differentiate, as there should be, right? I mean, like that's what makes the world go around. Um, but you're walking out of both of those restaurants with a great meal. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue like, you know what? See, so this is part last night it was 2 nights ago. We watched a documentary on Prime called Nobu, and it's about Nobu Makawisi or whatever. He's widely considered the most successful sushi chef in the world, whatever. And he had the restaurant in New York City and everything. And he is so driven by his passion for excellence, and it's so inspiring. And you say, like, it's just, you're in awe that on a global level, he can have this level of quality. So there's no way that I would compare a, a meal at Nobu with all that goes with it, because it's not just about the fish, right? It's about the experience when you walk into the restaurant and everything like that. I wouldn't compare that to the sushi place that is in downtown Westfield, right? Because that's not fair. But again, if you discount that sensory element, right, or the nostalgia, and you just go on sound, and this is not your primary thing, right? Like this is just, I mean, I'm into analog synths, but I'm not like, you know, I'm not doing like 80s synth pop, or like early 80s synth pop. Like I appreciate that. I feel nostalgia for that. But for me, it's not it's not enough to that those margins are not justified. Like because I but I have a Steinway piano. So you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I think you have to pick where it really you don't have to. I tend to pick where I you know like I spent more money on this Nord stage than other the Yamaha keyboards like Korg, like they could all do it. Like for me, I knew I was paying a premium and I gave in to the margins, right? And it's a hotly debated thing, by the way, because um, people are having this debate all the time. And for me, I was like, in my life, I can afford to be particular and splurge for some things or one thing, but not everything. And so when I say, well, you said, why do I have a Prophet 5? Like why don't I run out and get one today? Um, I think part of that is this rooted element of, you know, limited resources and limited time and attention. And I choose to funnel that energy into work with what I've painstakingly assembled. I mean, uh, yeah. So the Nord Stage 4 came out recently, and I wrestled with whether or not I would sell my Nord Stage 3 and get a 4. And I spent, Lori's tired of me talking about it. In the end, I decided no. Like I was comfortable with what I had, and but I know plenty of players who went out and they pre-ordered the 4 and they wanted the new model and they got rid of the old one, and so that's it. And I
Yeah.
guess it's just a different philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's again, it's fascinating. Do you all right, well let me ask you a very specific question because I really don't know much about keyboards at all. Right? So, let's just say that almost 2 hours ago, somebody started listening to this and was like, "Oh, I want to learn about collecting keyboards."
Huh?
And they're like, "I have not learned anything about collecting keyboards." Um, let's give them a little bit of something. Uh, how many are there? How many brands are out there? Is there, so these are kind of just the quick hitters of kind of getting a sense of what's out there. Are we talking, is it kind of like guitars where there's two or three kind of mega players and then a bunch of boutique sort of things of various quality? Or,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd say that's true. There might be 4 or 5 major players,
okay.
and then boutique stuff. Yeah.
And who are those major players?
So right now it would be like Nord, Yamaha, Roland, Korg, um, Sequential Circus is the original manufacturer of the Prophet 5, but they have merged with Oberheim, which was another big player. Yeah, so those are the main guys, and then there's boutique thing. It's ironic. This is funny. Because I'm in all these, like you said, if someone said, I don't know anything about, there's websites, like there's one place called Gear Sluts. It's funny. Musiciansgear.com, whatever. And there's these forums and everything. So I came across this new boutique analog synthesizer that I think was released by an Australian company. And it was an analog synth, expensive, kind of boutique. And the name of the synth was the Nina, which is my daughter's name.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, there's a synthesizer named Nina. Like, I gotta have that. Like, I got, and then my left brain kicks in and goes, wait a second, this is a boutique company from Australia. What happens if this thing breaks? Like, it's so niche that like I wouldn't even be able to get it repaired. In the end, it would be more of a pain in the ass than anything else. So I didn't pull the trigger on it. But anyway,
That's yeah. It's really, really interesting. You know, the next time we talk, I'm really curious how the other aspects of your life, if they parallel this sort of same way of thinking. I suspect they do.
yeah,
Um,
I suspect so too.
um, okay, so there's five or six kind of big players. What's the what's the ground floor in terms of cost? Like, yeah, you probably could pick something up for $50, but just like guitars, like if you're buying a guitar for $50, you're probably not going to have a very good experience, right? But if you
Mm-hmm.
buy you buy something, a Squire or, an
Mm-hmm.
Epiphone for $400. Yeah, you're probably gonna start to have a pretty nice experience. Where are we at in terms of cost to get into the
At the
keyboard
pro
world?
level, um, you're probably talking realistically no less than 1,000 or 1,500, depending upon what type of keyboard you're getting.
Okay.
There's digital pianos, there's workstations, there's organs, yeah, but no less than 1,000 or 1,500. Um, and the current sticker price for a Nord Stage 4 88, which is causing outrage in the world of poor musicians, is about 6 grand.
Wow. Okay. Um, what about amateur, versions of this? I'm whatever. I'm 14 years old. I want to get into it, but again, I want to have a good, I mean, this. If you give someone a $50 guitar, the chances of them still being a guitar player in 6 months is probably zero because they're like, I can't push the
Mm-hmm.
action is so high, it's awful. That sounds like garbage. What's the equivalent of a keyboard? Or you're like, no, no, you got to get the pro version.
No, probably in the $400 or $500 range. You can get a gateway instrument.
Okay. And what might that
Um,
be? What might that gateway instrument be? For guitars, it's, Squire, Epiphone,
yep,
Yamaha,
yep.
maybe. What is it in the keyboard world?
So Yamaha has offerings in the non-pro category in the under $1,000 range, as does Roland. Casio is a player. Korg, they have their flagships, and then they pull away features from the flagships. They put lesser quality keyboards on them. Use much more plastic, and the build quality is not that good. And some of those lower end keyboards have speakers, built-in speakers. So if you buy a professional level keyboard, you need an amplifier, you need a PA or studio. So yeah, like in the several hundred to 500 bucks range, you could get a keyboard. I think we were in Costco. We saw a Roland the other day. It's like 400 bucks or something.
Did you have to walk out with like four of them?
But only so much as you can fit them in those boxes.
Right. Um, okay, so if you buy one of the less expensive, there's some other things you need to buy, some again, speakers and
No, it's
amplifiers.
actually the opposite. So
Oh,
so the least expensive ones tend to be much out of the box, where they have built-in speakers. I mean,
got it.
the quality is not that good, but I mean, but a Nord Stage 3 does not come with built-in speakers. It's designed to be used in a professional context where you have an amplifier or PA.
Okay. Um, Now, do you get into that at all? Is that an area? It's so funny. I'm trying my best to figure out how you're a collector. Uh, is it
I may not be.
no,
Um,
I don't. It's really funny because I don't think you, I mean, I think there's a lens at which what you do can be viewed as collecting. And maybe that's, the obvious, the collection of sounds. I think that,
Yeah.
a collector of sounds, is really legitimate. I think that's not just sort of a silly little throwaway. I mean, I think if through the lens of no, really what I've discovered through this conversation is that you collect sounds. I would say, yeah, that seems to make sense
Hmm.
because it's not the objects themselves, while they hold, they certainly hold value to you. They don't seem to hold value in the way that I think a lot of collectors would characterize their relationship with the things that they have. Uh, but the sounds themselves, right? When we get back to the earlier parts of the conversation, the experiences, the energy, the memories, all of these
Hmm.
things, the fact that your gateway into all of that, into it, but also adding to is the sounds. I mean, that makes sense to me. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's the whole notion of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, collecting for the sake of collecting, as opposed to collecting to accomplish something separate than the mere act of collecting, if that makes sense. All my collecting has been, um, in pursuit of the right tool set to let me accomplish something else. And that tool set has changed over the years. It's not been static, really. And when, the funny thing is, one of my newest things that are on the horizon, more so than buying a Prophet 5, is that the current 88 key piano that I carry around as a trigger is almost 40 pounds. And I'm getting older. And the second something comes out with good keyboard action that I could sub that out with, I'm going to jump on that because I want lighter equipment when I go out and play. It's just a physical thing. Like I feel like the morning after, my hip hurts. I mean, it's horrible getting old. But um, and in a lot of these chat rooms, people are talking about that. They're saying, why would the manufacturers come out with a lighter 88 key keyboard that feels like a piano action? That's another big buzz word. And that at this stage of my life where I walk away saying I love my rig, the only thing I don't love is loading it out at the end of the night. The common joke I say this virtually every night, like we're loading the gear out, and I say to everybody like, "Where's the glory now?" Like 10 minutes ago, I was up on stage, there were lights, people were like cheering, and now I'm like lifting a 50-pound speaker into my car, and I'm like, when I was 21, I had roadies. Like, where did I go wrong here?
Yeah, I get that. That is actually always an odd moment in the evening. And I say this because I have a fair amount of friends who are musicians
Mm-hmm.
who do, something similar to what you're saying. And if I go to the gig, I always stick around afterwards and help them, load out. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's, 10 minutes earlier, just as you described, people are hooting and hollering and cheering. And then, a little bit later, you're sort of out in a parking lot, standing behind somebody's hatchback and asking like, well, do you put the, you know, do you put the, mic stands in first? Like it just so becomes
Yeah,
this, just completely practical, could not be, less glamorous, version, of a person's existence.
I used to play with this bass player, this phenomenal guy. He at the time he was a Berkeley graduate, and he was writing a monthly article for Bass Player magazine, right? Really, really incredible player. And he used to tell the story about how he got out of Berkeley and he landed this gig writing for Bass Player magazine, but he was taking wedding gigs, like, to pay the bills. And he was rolling his bass amp through a kitchen to go into a wedding gig. And the manager came in. He was like, "You can't come in through here." He started screaming at this guy like he was some sort of migrant farmer. Like, and he was like, Dave was saying to himself, "I have a degree from Berkeley. I write for Baseball Magazine, and some restaurant or catering facility guy is like ripping me apart like I'm a piece of garbage." It's just like, you know, where's the glory? Like, you know, where's the basic human respect for a musician? You know, I'm just trying to play a gig here. You know, someone told
Oh,
me to come in through this way.
that's so funny. It's so funny. It's so true. It's so sad, actually.
It
Really, I
is.
mean, I mean, it's hard. An artistic life is really difficult.
It truly is.
All right, so let me wrap it up this way
Mhm.
then. Because we've had, couple hours to kind of dig into this a little bit. So maybe your answer is slightly different than before. But if one, uh, again, if I've heard everything correctly, the closest approximation of a collector is that idea of you're a collector of sounds, right? And maybe that's not exactly the right way to categorize it, but I can't really think of a different way to phrase it. But it seems like because you have this, not to, you have access to a collection of sounds, but you know what to do with it, right? You know how to manipulate, you know how to sequence, you know how to infuse it with energy, like all of those things. And then these keyboards, these tools that you have, this is the thing that gives you access to going back to this idea of playing music for other people and yourself, but
Mhm.
it taps you into that energy flow. And you've mentioned, right, how there, leading up to that moment and after that moment, it's not particularly glamorous. It's a lot of sacrifice. It's certainly not a way that you could make a living. So there's all these downsides. Then you've talked about the cost of these things as well. So there's something about that moment between the performance starts and when the performance ends. There's something about that energy that clearly you want, right? I don't want to say the word addicted, but it's clearly
Need.
something.
You almost need it. Yeah.
I mean, it's so wrap it up with another, just in the through the lens of everything that I just described. And again, maybe I got that description wrong,
I think I
but
lost you there for a second.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So through the lens of the thing, the what I've just described, maybe hopefully I've characterized kind of where you're at and how you think about these tools and the sounds and um tell me again about being on stage and that the thing that you're craving, the thing that you're somewhat addicted to, the thing that keeps you coming back over and over again. Because clearly it's important and it's something you want to keep doing as long as you can. Um, Help us understand your relationship to those moments.
Well, you said that I'm a collector of sounds, but I would broaden it out. I'm a collector of tools that enable me to do the things that I want to do, much in the same way that if I were doing woodworking, if I had a particular lathe, I would want the best lathe to do woodworking. I wouldn't necessarily collect lathes because it only has utility as it applies to me doing woodworking. So all the gear that I've collected allows me to experience playing music with other people and having the best possible feeling that I'm doing that at a high level, that I'm serious about it, that I bring care and craftsmanship to what I'm doing. I'm not a hack. Um, I show up on time. I have good gear. It sounds good. I know the tunes, and that is all in pursuit of doing something that I'm obsessive about, that I feel that stopping is has never been and will never be an option, because it's kind of an essential element in life that if I take it out, I feel a huge gaping hole. And although I have a good life in other ways, I can't envision a future where I don't have a musical element.
Mm. Okay, I thought that would be the last question, but I want to follow up because you said something that's interesting. And maybe this helps me understand it even slightly better than, you've expressed it very, very well. Imagine that hole, right? Imagine
Mm-hmm.
it's taken away from you. You can't do it anymore. The hole is there. What is the hole? What's missing?
Well, for me, I'll speak very personally. I've felt like my entire life has been, I guess I could generalize it. Uh, I've been in conflict with my left brain and my right brain, and there I have a tremendous amount of pragmatism that tempers my other side, and I use the term irrational or whatever. So I think that if you took away the music and you just left the pragmatic Bill, um, it would be a life in many ways devoid of joy in any sense, because I would be just a responsible lawyer, um, with no outlet that sparked me. Um, and then I would be responsible for responsible sake, which seems to me would be a very sad place. I mean, do you need anybody needs something to get them up in the morning? And I reminded of the Seinfeld sketch where they say, like, we're not men. Like, what do we have any real reason to get up in the morning? And George
Hmm.
says, I like to read the Daily News. Like,
Right.
so I think that if I remove this element of my life, I would have very little of the right brain Bill balancing me as a human being. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, that's great. I mean, it's great that you have that. It's great that you have that outlet. You found it early. It's something that I think you can do forever, hopefully. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's really anyway, it's great. I love this conversation. Uh
it's my first podcast conversation.
Well, it's so funny. Like, for me, these are just conversations, right? It doesn't, it goes where it goes. And so I don't know. To me, this is the beauty of other people, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can only live one life yourself. And so then the trick is to try and, as the best you can, get into the head of other people, even for just short amounts of time. So to hear your approach to music, to hear your approach to, these objects that help you create music. Um, and in many cases, it feels very counterintuitive for me. It's very enjoyable, to hear that perspective. So I appreciate your time.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that, uh, and not to comment at all on how he made his exit, but one of my favorite things to do in life used to be at 11 o'clock to put Channel 13 on and watch Charlie Rose, because Charlie Rose used to do exactly what you just described. He'd have conversations with people from all walks of life, and I used to find it fascinating. I'd pick up on books that I would want to read. He would have artists on, he'd have politicians, and he had that table, and he would just sit around the table and he would talk to these people. And so it is a very powerful thing. It's a very nourishing thing, because you get to see different perspectives and think about things that you wouldn't necessarily normally think about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I suspect if we opened up the can of how the can of like how that relates to our earlier conversation about analog versus digital,
There
I think there's probably a lot in there.
might be a sequel. Might
But
be a
we won't do
sequel.
that right now. Yeah, exactly. Volume two.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. But well, thanks, Bill. Again,
Yeah.
I really appreciate this.
It was a lot of fun, and I think that I should probably sign off because I have a feeling that my family is upstairs trying to dig out the cars, and I've been fortunate to escape that. But I should hop into that mix.
Right, right. Well, I think the snow's still falling, so you probably still have much more to shovel. Uh, and I hope that someday you actually have a Profit 5 in your basement, and that when that day happens, please call me. I want to come over and hear it and see it.
Awesome.
All
We
right.
got a deal.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bill.
Steve.
Appreciate it.
All
Tell
right.
everyone I said hi.
I will. Bye bye.
Bye.